All right. Hello, everybody. It is June 19th, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Today, so I'm Joe, also known as the Stoic Viking, and we are going to be covering some recaps of everything that's going on. Uh, Mostly, we're going to be covering the Iran deal and all the stuff that goes around along that, the MOU, and to anybody's surprise that the potential deal, because it's not a signed deal, is falling apart. Anybody who really truly understands the culture and the atmospherics of the Iranian people or the IRGC that is currently in charge know that this was not really going to go through just for a number of different factors. So, what's up, everybody? It's awesome to see a bunch of you guys already in here. What's up, Rack Shadow, Wet Bubbles, Jean Pierre? What's up, boys? How you guys all doing today? All right, can everybody hear me? Make sure that my mic is not dumb down. I think everything's good. Let me know if you guys can hear me. BP Punny, what's up, brother? All right. If you guys can't hear me for whatever reason, I think everything's good to go, but I'm just gonna start going. All right, sweet deal. I appreciate you guys. All right, so today we're going to be covering the Iran conflict and essentially where things have been going, right? So a lot of the hostilities, the missiles have stopped flying for at least 10 seconds. The headlines have shifted away from imminent war, but I'd argue that the most important phase is only the beginning one, which is while right now it seems like the military phase is ending and that we're going into these series of talks back and forth, right? We have to kind of understand the posturing that is going on both sides, right? So a lot of the ways that you win wars, conflicts, is not just militarily. You have to win it politically. Um, you if you the people do not accept it, you're causing more issues down the line. Issues of legitimacy within a particular conflict and even how people even see it, whether people see it as a win versus a loss, has a lot to do with whether or not some of this is actually going to happen or this. Let me rephrase that. Dealing with these other factors is whether or not what goes into the decision making into a number of the decisions of the whoever's in charge, both on the American side and the Iranian side, and obviously other countries involved as well as like Israel and things like that. So, so the key question is, we talk about this, and I hear this all the time. Did we solve everything? Are we just simply hitting the pause button, right? So let's take if you take as an objective view about what have we accomplished in this whole thing, right? So for anybody who doesn't know, and I professionally have been working against the IRGC, the Quds Force, the Iranian government for most of my career. So I may seem a little biased in this, but I have seen what the Iran's government, IRGC, the Quds Force, and formerly Qasem Soleimani was capable of, and the things that they've done. They've killed Americans. They've done a lot of things. I am a firm believer that they are bad news, and I'm also tied heavily within the Persian community within the United States. So I also think that they are, even the Iranian diaspora also believes that there's a that this government, this regime needs to go, and you can obviously see even if like think the percentage is probably somewhere around 70%, maybe more, of the Iranian general population, especially the people outside of the IRGC, who also believe that this regime needs to go. So what has been accomplished, right? So we did see that the Iranian people were getting to, or the Iranian government was getting to a point of, well, kind of like a terminal velocity of their capabilities militarily. They were getting to the point they were doing a buildup in both their intercontinental ballistic programs, their drone programs, their navies, their air force. Everything was getting stronger, and there was going to get to a certain point. It was going to be difficult to contain them. So there was a couple different things that happened involving Israel, the United States. It's my general view that we saw this as an opportunity to take advantage of a situation that Israel was trying to force. You know, You can argue that however you want. I just believe that this is generally these airstrikes have been a good thing because we have set them back. We have reduced almost all of their capabilities of having effect outside of the country of Iran to 90, 95%. Their Navy, the Air Force, their drone program, their missile program, all these different things. So, and then people who are asking themselves, why have we not won this war? Right? Because there was two choices to do this. Like if you were going to go to war with Iran, you have two choices. Generally, you either do what we're doing, which is a sort of missile strikes and sort of staying back and protecting American lives, if you will, versus doing boots on the ground, doing a full-on invasion. Obviously, that would have probably more direct effect. It would be more effective, but you risk thousands upon thousands of Americans' lives. And even if you were successful, you put a what do you say? You put holes. The legitimacy of their new government comes into question, right? Because the Iranian people, we're in a situation where the majority of the people within that country want the regime to change. So, one, we lost that political capital in Iraq, and I've talked about this before, but the Iranian people want this to change, right? Whether or not they will actually enact and go forward with that, that's another question. But the strategy here is to, one, accomplish certain military goals, which is reducing a lot of their external military capabilities, but also giving the Persian people or the Iranian people within the country a chance, right? But that takes time, right? Is this going to be successful or not? That's a question, right? But that is the general idea. So when people think about like, hey, why is this not over? Because we've sort of adopted a strategy to bleed them out, right? That is my general understanding and belief that that is what is going on based off of my previous experience and knowledge of already existing battle plans or thoughts of how to do this was bleeding them out in sort of this way economically, if you will. Um, so so Rack Shadow, he should never went to Iran to begin, especially not without a plan. So that's a common thing that I hear. So I'll be honest with you, this actually was one of the plans was to bleed them out economically and to, seriously diminish their external forces and let the Iranian people try to take over, right? So the factor that we really can't control is how the Iranian people take over, right? And I'll get into this later, but mainly there are two things that you need in order to take for a armed revolution to happen within the country. One, you need major divisions within its controlling organizations, which is currently the IRGC, the Islamic Republic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And then you need an actual armed uprising, right? The Iranian people have to basically say, "Hey, I'm willing to take this, risk my life for that," right? That needs to happen. That's a little bit harder said than done. It's easy for us to say that we're not the ones putting our lives in danger, and plus, that country, the population has been essentially subjugated for the last 47 years. Um, Yeah, and then also, like, you have to think, we're like this started, correct me if I'm wrong, March was it February 28th or March 28th? Wait, I think we're like 4 months into this, right? Um, and people were like, "Oh, why is it not over?" Never in the history of war has been a conflict been over in 4 months, right? People most of these conflicts last, like, years, 10 years, like, how long we were in Iraq, how long we were in Afghanistan, so put into some perspective, like if this war, if let's just say that if this was successful and we were successful in 6 to 8 months, we would look back on it. It would be one of the quickest downfalls of a major political sovereign power in the history of warfare, right? But here we are at month four. Yeah, I think it was the end of February. I think it was the beginning of March. So basically, at month four, we're complaining, why is it not over yet? Why is it not over yet? If anybody who understands military history, that's a really unrealistic expectation. Am I saying this is going to succeed? I'm not, right? But we have to keep when we're analyzing and we're looking at this, we need to keep all this stuff into perspective, if that makes sense. So, and honestly, remember, you're going to hear from the left and the right. You're going to hear from the right that like this is going amazing, this is going perfect, this is going plan and strategy, right? Probably not, because one, no plan ever goes to plan, right? That's the first thing that you learn about combat military is that the uh the second that the plan starts, the plan has to adapt because everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? Or the first bullet flies over. And then on the other side, between people just hating Trump and the political divisiveness in the country, people are just going to take everything that happens and try to turn it towards a political narrative. It's going to happen on both sides. So we have to keep that in mind going forward as we try to as we attempt to analyze this situation, right? And that's it's not easy. It's harder because everybody's chirping our ears. It is this, it is that, right? Like I was just listening to CNN today talk about they named off the 14 points of the deal, right? And then two of the deal parts of the deal is us releasing frozen assets, right? Which is technically their money. It's not our money. We'd release it to them, right? And then they talked about the $300 billion investment package, which they specifically specified that it would not be coming from the United States. So nowhere in this monetary relief was any of the money going to be American money, right? So the news anchor reads this stuff off. And then 10 seconds later, I shit you not, she says, "Oh," and she turns to her other anchor, "Oh, so we're going to pay the Iranian people to open the Strait of Hormuz?" None of the money would be coming from us, right? Like that's just even say that this deal is going to go forward, but I guarantee you it's not. If I had it was a betting man and we were getting on whatever these betting websites are, uh I would bet that this is not going to go through. That's my expert guess, but it isn't what it is. And so we'll get into more of this in a little bit. So, um, our plan or Israel's, Joe. All right, look, you guys gotta really, this concept, like, does Israel try to influence us? Yes, you'd be stupid to think that they don't try to, right? But I can tell you from being inside the intelligence community within the United States at the highest levels, I can tell you that Israel does not control the United States, right? Do they try to influence politicians? Absolutely. They try to influence everywhere they go. But we know this, right? They even tried to conduct operations against US intelligence operations. We know this, right? And we know what they're up to, right? So just because this is something that Israel wants, and also it's something that we want as well, that doesn't, just because we have similar objectives concerning a certain country, because we wanted the fall of the Islamic regime for a really long time, does not mean Israel controls us, right? So let's get that sort of out of the way. Like this concept that Israel, this is Israel. No, trust me, I've been a part of this. We've wanted this for a very long time. Okay. All right. So let's get into this. So what? So I think one of the things that people need to understand, right, is that there have been so far a lot of good things, right? Remember the ballistic program, the Navy, the Air Force, and then a lot of things that people aren't understanding is one of their biggest external influences was their terror networks, these proxy networks, right? Because we have now blockades, restricted them, everything that's going on. The majority of money that has been flowing to these terrorist networks has been greatly reduced, right? They're still going to have a little bit of money. They're still going to be able to do operations, Hezbollah, but majority of their money uh, for a lot of these groups has been reduced, and that's why I've been seeing like reduced operations and from these different things. So, but let's talk about real quick this concept of, because people think this is a deal, right? Or there was a deal, right? But what they were talking about was was an MOU, right? Which is this memorandum of understanding. So, what is an MOU? Most people think hear agreement and assume the problem is solved. You know, But a memorandum of understanding is basically we agree on where we are trying to go. It's not a treaty. Uh, it's not a final contract. It's not a permanent settlement. Think of it as like buying a house. The buyer agrees to buy, and the seller agrees to sell, but the inspection isn't done. The financing isn't approved. The paperwork isn't complete. The deal isn't final. The same thing applies here. The easy part was agreeing to talk. The difficult part is agreeing on the details, and also in this particular situation, following through. Exactly. Sale pending, right? But imagine you're doing a sale with somebody who you know is notorious for bringing fake money, not claiming they have a loan app or approved loan. What is that thing called when you have an approved a loan amount, right? Just showing that you have proof that you have the funds to. I think that there's a word for it. I'm like was huge in real estate. I should know this off the top of my head, but they're like the type of people that like show up and they're like, "Hey, I swear I've got this money," but it turns out to be fake. Um, yeah, it's like a certificate of something. I forget what it is. I'm sure somebody can Google it, but yeah. So, so, so this is where it's sort of, you know, so one we talk about when we talk about this deal, right? So one of the reasons why, and I was just asked about this. I don't know if you guys have seen the episode where I appeared on the episode with Jay from Green Beret Chronicles and Nick Irving, right? And we talked about, I was on the episode of Black Ops, cool time, awesome dudes. But I will tell you that one of the questions I got asked at the end was, is this deal going to go through, right? And we recorded this past Saturday. And I said that it wasn't, right? Because I know how the Iranian people work. I know how the IRGC works and how their leadership acts. So people that are asking, I hear this as well, is what about some of the points within this 14-point deal? Why do some of them seem kind of weak, right? So, and I'm not saying this is the case, but I want you to think about this, right? Because this is a negotiation tactic that has been used in history and we have used it ourselves. So we know that the Iranian people or the IRGC, when I say the Iranian people, I mean the IRGC, right? We know that there's two things, one specifically, that they are never going to agree to, which is the nuclear portion of the deal, right? Because they believe that it's a part of their sovereign right, even though the whole world knows that they can't trust them, including the Arab world as well. Let me move that camera. My tripod is a little messed up, so I apologize. Um, so now knowing this, right? So if you're going to go in with this deal, right, and public opinion throughout the world is a thing, right? You have to understand. So if you're a country who just comes in and it just looks like you're bullying everybody, you're going to lose public support or what little public support that you had, not only maybe with your country, but throughout the rest of the world. Like one of the best things that happened from the American perspective is when we were attacking Israel and the United States were attacking, that Iran responded with indiscriminate attacks against the Gulf states, right? One of the best things, dumbest things they could have done, but one of the best things for us because it gained us more public approval for what we were trying to do, is specifically within the Arab world and with among the Gulf states. So now you are doing a deal, right? And you know that there's one thing that they're never going to say yes to. So you put other things within this deal that look favorable to them, like to the rest of the world, that, hey, we're legitimately trying to give you something, knowing that they're still going to say no. So we look in a way magnanimous, like we're being helpful, but we know they're going to say no because there's one thing within the deal, right? So I want you to keep that in mind when you look at this 14-point deal and you're like, wow, why do we have some of these things in here that these make it would like this would be like a bit of an L for us, right? Keep that in mind, right? Because that is a possibility. Not only is that something that's been done historically within debates, We as a country have done that historically in negotiations within these types of deals, right? So just keep that in mind when you're looking at this, right? Because everybody wants to see everything as black and white. Nothing is black and white, specifically when it comes to this type of level of posturing deals, because you know, if every deal that you see that's reported, there's other deals going on either behind people's backs, below the table, everything like that. That's how the real world works. Like nothing is black and white. Trust me. So, but so let's go over the points of this deal, right? First and foremost, the ending of hostilities, right? So what is the Iranian view on the ending of hostilities, or at least the things that they claim, right? Is that the hardliners within the IRGC, they see negotiations as weakness. So the questions that then arise, like, did they sacrifice people only to negotiate? Did they give up leverage, right? Because the IRGC, you have to understand that they're hated, not really liked by the rest of their population. So, and they've committed a bunch of atrocities, like, going back to all the protesters that were killed in January. How we don't even know how many have been killed since uh, um, the internet has been shut off since March 28th. So when eventually, if they get ousted and the Iranian people take over, there's going to be a bit of a cleansing, kind of similar to when the Islamic Revolution took over from the Shah and its allies. A lot of people were killed. So you have to think about, like, so them holding on to power is not just them holding on to power. A lot of them may see it as like their lives are at risk. So think about that when the people who are in charge refuse to give up power. So, all right. So, but the American view on ending hostilities is that the Iran survives, the regime survives, the RG survives, and have we merely given them time to recover? Right? Like, so do we really want the IRGC to survive? To the regime, everything like that. Like, so that's one issue with obviously ending hostilities. But also, is there some sort of hidden strategy underneath this? So then the next point is a 60-day negotiation window. So the Iranian concerns is, will sanctions relief actually happen? Will the negotiations drag on forever? And will this actually get honored? Will this get honored by the Americans? Will this get honored by the Iranians? And if you're judging by what has happened already, it's kind of doubtful that this is going to get honored on either side. So, obviously, as an American concern, will the Iranians use this as time to rebuild their facility, move assets, strengthen positions? Like, we have, both us and the Iranians throughout this conflict, anytime that there's been a ceasefire, we have used it to reposition. Like for one of the first ceasefires, we actually used it to rearm our forces and our carrier fleets that were there. Um, both sides can benefit from time, from this 60-day uh, from this 60-day negotiation window, right? So the Strait of Hormuz, right? This is a second point. This is one of Iran's strongest leverage points, kind of besides the nuclear deal. This is probably their biggest thing that they just will not let go of. And so roughly 20% of all global oil passes through this region. So Iran gives up leverage, they will the US will gain stability, and both sides basically are going to remain suspicious. Iran wants, like, one of the things that they're trying to argue for is that they want to be able to tax, like do tolls, right? Remember, they did not have this ability prior to this conflict. So they want something that they didn't even have. Like, whether they think of it as something as reparations, it's probably more of like, hey, this is a way for them to show that they got a little bit of a W out of this. Like, there's a little bit of a win, right? And this is kind of to kind of throw dirt in America's face, say like, hey, we got something out of it, right? Because they will hold on to whatever dignity that they can in this particular process. So, and always it's going to come back to, will Iran honor this deal, right? Any sort of deal that is even signed, like, we haven't even gotten to the point where a deal is signed, but even when a deal is signed, is it going are they even going to honor it, right? Like, because there's a reason why nobody in that part of the world trusts this country. It is what it is. So So as far as and then the next point of the deal is maritime restrictions. So Iran wants guarantees, but America wants compliance. Neither side fully trusts the other for obvious reasons. So the nuclear program, this is the center of gravity. This is everything that we know, especially from the American side. What is the biggest issue for them? Iran views it as their sovereignty, that they should have this level, they should be able to achieve this level of scientific achievement. And sort of it's their strategic insurance. Like everybody else gets to have nuclear deterrence. Why can't they have nuclear deterrence, right? I think a lot of us can answer the question why we don't believe that's a good idea. So America views this as a proliferation risk, right? To create regional instability and potential existential threat to allies because we know one of the reasons that nuclear deterrence works because all the powers that had nuclear deterrence, we could rely on their sort of cultural, moral foundations that they would not kill everybody, their enemies, if it meant them dying, right? So a lot of the countries that have nuclear weapons, they care more about themselves living than they do martyrdom, if you will. Like Kim Jong Un wants to stay in power, and he cares more about that than nuclearing his enemies. We cannot say that for sure with Iran. I know this is one of the concerns because we believe that they might sacrifice their own lives just to wipe out Israel and wipe out the United States. I think it's like part of their mission, and that's always when you deal with theology and doing things for the greater good in the name of God, Allah, whatever it is you pray to. That is a bit of an issue, right? Like because you can't it's the extremists with nuclear weapons that has always been the biggest fear, and where nuclear deterrence doesn't really cover that. So, and also because we are so strict on this, we also know that this is like the one thing that they're never going to agree to. So, you know, and so why is that? Why do we keep doing that? Right. And I'll get to that later. Why, my personal opinion, why I think that's going down. So next point of the deal is the oil exports because Iran has because we've cut off almost everything. Karg Island is where they process 90% of the crude oil. Is all the reserves, all the tanks are full. They can't do anything. They really can't ship out any oil. They are there's their inflation in their country is going through the roof. They are hurting economically. They are on a spiral down to complete an economic collapse. So they need this revenue. So this oil export, um, and obviously our worry of this is they by giving them access to their oil again will allow them to strengthen the regime and also rebuild. And if they have not learned their lesson, will we just have to come back and do this again? So that's obviously a concern. The frozen assets. So Iran argues it's our money, and which, technically it is, right? And the American is asking, like, what happens once you get it? What are they going to do with it, right? Should like we've already made that mistake in the past, which is unfreezing assets through previous administrations. And what do they end up doing it? They just end up using it to build up arms and actually really not improving their economy, which is what they should be doing with it. But I guarantee you, because the IRGC is in control, that's what they're going to do. They're going to take that money and they're going to strengthen the IRGC because with everybody there's like the inflation, all the economic problems, the majority of people within Iran are struggling. They're hurting. They're probably their power, food, everything like that. You know who's not hurting? The IRGC, because every little bit of resource that's coming into the country, they're hoarding it. So the next point is reconstruction. So Iran wants an investment. America wants accountability. So what is the challenge, right? The IRGC touches and is in control of huge portions of the economy, if not definitely majority of it. So how do you invest in Iran without strengthening the IRGC? And that's the big question. How do you, right? Because they are so over the last especially the last 20 years, the IRGC has been consolidating not just military and political power, but economic power. So majority of the economic industries are controlled by IRGC members. So that's obviously a big issue. And this comes back to money. Like, what are they going to do with that money? So next is verification. This may be one of the most important issue because Iran fears inspections will become intelligence gathering, right? At least that is their excuse. America fears promises without verification. And if we know the history of somebody who has tried to cheat and get around verification prior, they've done it before. Of course, we're not going to trust them. So even if we were to make a deal, which we have prior, and they have violated the terms of this specific portion of their deals, including verification. So every previous dispute eventually came back to the inspections, which, as we know, Iran has basically screwed that up. They can't be trusted for a reason, right? So, and we've already talked about like what are the reasons why we these deals, right? Like, why do some of the points seem weak on the American side, right? Because we know there's definitely a possibility that we know that they're not going to agree to the nuclear portion of the deal. So you can throw a lot in there that you probably would normally let, you know, normally put on the table, but you know they're not going to agree to it anyways. So you might as well look magnanimous in the process. So that's definitely one of the possibilities. So, all right. Do you think Iran is a threat to the U.S. because of our strong military alliance with Israel? Part of me think if we stopped funding Israel, we wouldn't have issues with Iran, the proxies. No. So, um, is Iran has just as many problems with us than is Israel, if not more. Like they actually see, even if we stopped attacking Iran will there is a reason why one of their chants, like they even do this at school for their kids, is death to America, right? If you think that we stopped helping Israel, that suddenly Iran is going to look at it as any differently, they're not. And actually, a lot of their issues with us have nothing to do actually with Israel, right? So they have their own issues with Israel, but they've been trying to kill Americans for a very long time. So this is not so we yeah, so we are considered the great Satan. Israel is not considered the great Satan. We are the great Satan. So mm, and we already talked about kind of what already Iran lost. You know, we've crushed their air defense networks, their missile infrastructure, their nuclear infrastructure. We damaged a lot of their facilities. The question is how much capability actually survived? How quickly and how much damage have we done? And how quickly would it take them to rebuild what they to get to the level that they're already at? So these are all questions that we don't know exactly the answers to, especially because I'm no longer in that particular world and access to the information, so I wouldn't know. And even if I did, obviously, if I was in that capacity, would be telling you guys anyways. Um, so, and then obviously we've killed a lot of the senior leaders within the country, right? So several experienced leaders were reportedly killed, and a lot of that experience matters, right? And this is a double-edged sword. So when you kill the experienced leaders, yeah, you might be killing the ones who are the then extremely against you, right? But in a lot of cases, sometimes when you get people who come and take their place, sometimes morally they can be worse. But also something when you kill majority of the leadership that's been in charge for a long time, the people that come into to power, especially in a government like the IRGC, which there's a lot of nepotism within this particular government. Like it's very family. Like if you're a family within the RGC, you can come up and be like a high level officer and never have actually been in command of anything. You are now having a lot of leaders who don't understand leadership and how to do things and how to control things. Um, so Here's the thing. Okay, I want you to like. There's an interesting point. So Rack Shadow says it all stemmed from the 50s, failed regime change by installing the Shah and overthrowing Mossadegh in the late 40s was set this on track. Okay, if you were a country who was once at war with us in the 40s and the 50s, and you are, regardless of what's going on, still want the extermination of our people, I think the issue is not us. I think it's the country that's acting like that. So I'll give you a parallel example. Japan and Germany, right? Obviously, both countries around obviously in the 40s wanted our destruction. And now they're some of our best friends. So using as justification for the eradication of our entire nation and our culture and our people just because we may have overthrown somebody does not, like, I'm sorry, that doesn't. Japan got obviously over it. Everybody else can get the fuck over it, right? Like that's where there's a lot of people, countries that we are friends with that at some point they didn't like us, or maybe we overthrew somebody within the government, right? This When you believe that an answer is the extermination of a people, there is no justification for that anywhere. No, no, I know you're right, but I'm not saying this is yours, but other people think this, right? And they're all what do you call it? Let's just call them Iranian apologists, right? They're like, oh, because we overthrew somebody, that it's okay for Iran to want this. No, I'm sorry, that's never okay. I don't care what you did, right? So, this is the dumb shit that I hear all the fucking time, right? Remember, let's live in reality, right? Are we perfect? No. Does that mean you need to eliminate the entire American culture and people? No. And if that's your gain, I'm sorry. Well, it's either kill or be killed. So, right? And to our credit, you don't see us using nuclear weapons on Iran. Um, for obvious reasons, because one, we know it's their leadership that's the problem, not the people of Iran. So that's why, trying to take out the government, or at least taking out a portion until the Iranian people can start revolution and take it over for themselves, which would be perfect. That would be honestly the best case scenario. But this takes time. So, um, and also we have to remember that the IRGC just isn't just a military. It is the ground fist. It is a complete separate military from their other military, right? But they are also, ground forces, missiles, naval forces, aerospace forces. It's their intelligence units, it's their counterintelligence, there's the domestic monitoring, the regional intelligence. Their influence throughout the government is second to none. Nobody controls more power than the IRGC. And now that we've destroyed most of the clerical leadership, the Ayatollahs and the Council of Guardians who arguably kept them in check are no longer there. So now the IRGC is doing whatever the F they want with luckily, with what little limited resources that we haven't taken out yet. So, then their economic power, they control construction, energy, telecommunications, transportation, import, export. The RGC is deeply embedded in the system. That's why that anytime that they want to, they can just turn the internet off. So, um, this affects like everything that the IRGC does, whether it's a proxy warfare, their cyber operations, their intelligence collection, their influence campaigns, and even their covert operations. So remember that all of this is affected by what we have done, right? So if we relieve pressure and we allow the IRGC to, if they're able to maintain power and stay in control, how long it is until they rebuild all this? And will they learn their lesson? Will they stop doing the BS that was one of the reasons that made us come and do this, right? So that's all a question, you know. I don't think that the IRGC is ever going to stop. That's just me personally. I don't think that they're unless they get some level of drastic cultural change within the organization and leadership, the IRGC is never going to change. So, you've got all the different proxies. So what is the future of that regime? Because Iran still faces major internal problems. So with the economy, you have major inflation. Their their currency is extremely weak. They have really bad unemployment. They're basically under martial law. Majority of people are not even allowed out of their homes for the last like 4 months. And large portions of populations, like over 70%, want change. There's extremely huge labor dissatisfaction because the IRGC is taking a majority of the money, especially during these times when the Iranian people are being subjugated by their own government. And then on top of that, you have all their ethnic issues, Kurds, Baluch, others. And these issues existed before the war, and they obviously remain today. They've only gotten worse. So there's just the growing divisions within the country of Iran are only growing. So, and we talk about this a little bit, but what are the two things like are historically for the Iranian Revolution of 2026 for them to take over and attack the Islamic, the essentially the regime that is now in power, right? There's two things that basically you need. All right, you need major divisions within the controlling current regime. There, whatever organization is in power, there needs to be huge divisions, right? So when something does happen, that if they're unified, they can respond to it. But if they're not, that's the cracks that they need for a armed revolution to happen. And that's the second part. The Iranian people need to rise up with weapons, right? That's what historically that is typically these are two things that typically are needed for this to happen. And just so you guys know, if this was to happen, like let's just say that the armed revolution that it would start tomorrow, it would probably take at least a year before it was even over, right? And that's with us probably helping from an intelligence and supplying weapons, similar to how we have with other countries, nations, how we helped Afghanistan against the Soviets in the 80s, things like that, right? So so we keep an eye on, what is the IRGC cohesion? How are all the disagreements that's going on between the IRGC leadership and even the what do you call them? The negotiators? Because anybody who's been following this, there is a huge division between the IRGC and the actual people who are doing the negotiations, right? They have, and as reportedly, it's been reported numerous times that the negotiators actually have very little latitude in what they're allowed to do and allowed to just say. They have to go back to their IRGC overlords and basically request permission for everything. When if you know what the IRGC's political views on this particular issue is, basically they're never going to surrender, and signing a deal is to them is surrendering. So yeah. Rack Shadow, you said, I'm just pissed Trump played pussyfoot. He didn't do what was necessary to enact change. Thus, in my opinion, failed miserably. So, what did you think that he needed to do differently to enact change that didn't involve boots on the ground? So, because yeah, tell me what you think. All right. So I think we talked about Iran enough. If you guys have any questions, feel free. But so now we're going to jump into talk about a little Russia and Ukraine. So a lot of things that have been going on. I don't know if you guys saw recently, but Ukraine has been, especially over the last like month or two, has been escalating their attacks into Russian territory and even into Moscow. All right, so this is Raksha. This is where I'm going to disagree with you. Boots were necessary to change anything. That's actually not true because so we everybody who was involved in this planning process, which I was in the early 2010s into like 2016, everybody who was involved wanted we enacted a plan, or we were drawing up a plan where we could accomplish this without boots on the ground, right? Because that was necessary, because one, we didn't have the political capital anymore. 2, we didn't want to risk lives for it. And then 3, the Iranian people are the only way that this goes off legitimately, and because there's such a strong sentiment to a regime change within that country, this is the only way that we see that we could happen because nobody, I can tell you, nobody in the United States military wants to invade Iran for a lot of different reasons, right? And so thinking that just because it has not happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Is it a possibility this could fail? Absolutely. I don't think it will necessarily completely because we've already accomplished a lot of our military goals. Um, but for the overall regime change, um, at the end of the day, it's about weakening a regime that may eventually, happen because regimes don't just fall overnight. And that's what people have to think about, right? It may not even fall this generation. Maybe we come back 5 years from now, weaken it again, and then it falls. These are all things that have happened throughout history. So you have to keep these things in mind, and you have to keep these things in perspective as far as the timeline. Because if you're complaining that a war is not over in 4 months, show me one successful war against any major country that was over in 4 months. That's not how that works. Especially because we're doing the bleeding out option, right, to save American lives. Because by not invading, our casualties, which last time I checked was like 13, would be in the thousands, right? So if you can accomplish the same goal, even though it would take longer, but saving thousands of American lives, I'm willing to see that happen, especially because I witnessed thousands of American lives get wasted in other Middle Eastern countries, which, you know, why? Why were we there, right? And I actually believe more in this conflict than I did Iraq, right? But that's a whole nother, that's neither here nor there. So so anyways, so a couple days ago they struck a refinery. Ukraine struck a refinery. Wow, I can't speak. A Moscow refinery was struck, and this is important because fuel is war, right? Fuel is war. Economy is war. Every tank, every truck, every aircraft requires fuel. So this is like strategic targeting. So Ukraine is increasingly targeting refineries, depots, energy infrastructure, and that is economic warfare. And that is what Ukraine believes that's the only way it's going to win because right now Ukraine in how much money they are spending is drastically less because they are relying on drones and they are using drones that maybe cost, maybe a couple $100s, right? Depending on the level. Some of them are pretty cheap. Like there's drones is like $50, throwing some explosives on it and then killing a tank that costs millions of dollars or vehicles and equipment that cost millions of dollars. If you do this, right, that is like, well, it's one of the ways that you win a war is by winning economically, by, spending less money than your opponent until your opponent runs out of money. And by them striking their refineries, the other sort of their depots and their energy infrastructure, that is a further continuation into the economic warfare which Ukraine is essentially using. Because one of the biggest lessons of this war is drones. A drone costing thousands or hundreds of dollars can threaten infrastructure worth billions, right? That is, it's honestly, it's changing the face of modern warfare. Because every military is studying this right now, including China, Russia, America, Israel, Iran. So, and the only reason that Ukraine is still in this war, this conflict is still in, and then Russia is not, is because of their choice of how much they have leaned into drone warfare, because they have been extremely successful in conducting economic warfare through drones, and it's honestly the only reason that they have not lost, and might be the main reason why they eventually might win, right? And that's another question. What does even winning even look like, right? Obviously, that has multiple different layers and that can be argued all day long. So No, man, I always appreciate the questions any of you guys come up with, and I'm never unless you say something stupid. I'm always interested to get other people's views, and I'm always open to somebody else having a different view than me. I will listen to it, right? Obviously, I'm gonna have my experiences, and I try to stay open minded. I really do, and it's easier said than done because everybody's got their own unconscious biases, and I try to stay aware of mine. All right, and I will acknowledge them as I acknowledge that because professionally, I have this has been a target set that I worked professionally against my most of my career. Obviously, with a little bias about what I want out of this or why I feel these airstrikes are a good thing, but that's just that's me. That's my experiences. Not everybody has my experiences. I get that. So, so, so what when it comes to Russia and Ukraine? So what's going to happen next? Next. So obviously, this war is not going to be over anytime soon. It's been at a stalemate for what are we coming up almost 4 years now, um, and we're not going to be entering some sort of peace or a lasting peace. Uh, Instead, we're going to increase intelligence. They're going to increase intelligence operations, cyber operations. Um, the wars are continuing, and then if you look at us versus Iran, intelligence operations are also going to increase. The cyber operations are not going to stop. Proxy activity through Iran's proxies are going to continue. And diplomacy will continue, right? At least in by name, not necessarily function, because we want the Islamic regime to end. But obviously, we need to appear as that we're trying to negotiate. When I think that the ultimate goal is for them to either surrender by agreeing to all the really bad things within the deal, or an Iranian revolution happening within the country. So it'll be curious to see what the next 30 to 60 days will determine. Whether it will they get the IRGC get to a point that they are so desperate that they will sign whatever deal just to preserve what little power they have. That's a question. They may do that. Like somebody might come into power within the IRGC or just say, hey, enough's enough. We'll sign whatever you deal. Just allow us to stay in power. Allow us to get the resources to calm our people so they don't start a revolution. Right. So that will require them, the current leadership, to change course. Will that happen? That's I don't know. Would will somebody with some common sense eventually take over in the RGC? Possibly, but I doubt it. Um, in that case, I don't know actually what's more likely to happen, that the an Iranian internal revolution or somebody within the IRGC to actually wise it up and agree to some of these terms and basically just say, okay, fine, no nuclear deal, right? Just so they can stay in power. So, so obviously, I think that the confrontation is going to continue. This is going to go back and forth, and we're going to continue doing strikes until the Iranian somebody within the Iranian government says uncle, right? So I don't think this MOU is going to go anywhere. I think that it's just a continuation of the back and forth. Iranians posturing for the rest of the world and mainly for their own people, or even to them, their own delusions. And we are posturing to show that we're trying, but at the same time, we're trying to bleed them out at the same time. So yeah. So I I'm doing a shorter live today. I'm only doing an hour because I got polo stuff to do and other things. Yeah. So I was gonna do a live about we were gonna do a tier list about the different special operations units and my rating of them, and not just American. We were gonna do Israel, British, um, Australian, cover the commandos, the Australian SAS, other nation's special operations unit, and I was going to break it down into my particular ranking of a tier system. Uh, and I am definitely going to ruffle some feathers, but I'll give you my analytical analysis of why I put things within a specific tier, and it's going to cover overall effectiveness, um, culture, right? Because obviously, if you guys have heard me talk, certain organizations are more toxic than others. But then a lot of the effectiveness, it not only comes back to the level of their training, but how much funding a unit has. Because unless you've been in an American special operations unit and then worked with a foreign special operations unit, you do not understand the night and day difference between American special operations and foreign special operations, because we get so much more done because we have so much more funding, right? It's a huge difference and more than people realize until you're in it, and then you see what the other guys are working with and what little, like, sometimes they can't even afford training, right? Like, and that's at the special operations level, at least not to the level that we can, right? Like, it's nonstop. So, uh, yeah, and I'll give you a little preview. So one of the reasons where you see this is the tier one Americans, like the tier one, your Delta, your SEAL Team 6, versus British and Australian SAS. While those are technically tier one, because they have such little funding in comparison, they are not on the same level. I can tell you that they may have started like that. Obviously, we may have used the British SAS as our original model, but I can tell you that the capabilities are no longer equivalent because two things. One, funding. I'm telling you that the reason why our guys are so good is because we get so much of the best training and we are so unlimited on funds nonstop. And then also, both in England and in Australia, their SAS guys are getting targeted. Like, literally, both in Australia and England, their SAS guys are being charged with um, uh, war crimes. So, like, for things that they were told to do by their own command, right? So, there's a lot of shit going wrong with those organizations right now. So, all that's going to be factored. Yeah, both members of the and British SAS and the Australian SAS. There's at least one. The most decorated member of the Australian military and the Australian SAS is being accused of war crimes right now by the Australian government. So, and then there's also people in the British government's going after members of the British SAS. It's just really, really bad. So, not only do they not have the same level of funding, their own government's going after them, right? So, if you can imagine being in those organizations and that's what's going on by your own country, the people that sent you to the war, the people that sent you to those commands, that gave you those orders, and now they're coming after you for war crimes. Yeah, fuck that. So, luckily, that's the one thing that we don't do in the United States, right? We're not going after our special operations tier one operators. Luckily, at least right now, we're not. So that obviously could change. You know, you get some crazy people in charge, and that shit happens. So, anyways, I appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining me on this said live. You guys are awesome. And I will. Oh, my point about the video was I was going to do a live about it, but I'm just going to do a pre-recorded video. I'm actually going to record that hopefully this weekend, if not by Monday. And tomorrow we have a video coming out. I did a video about the thwarted terror plot of the UFC 250, because I was actually at the UFC 250 event, and we knew that there was risks that were about to happen. There was a possibility that someone might try something. So as I went to the event, I actually used my camera to actually take B-roll and video of all the security that was in DC and the event itself. So that's all of them. I make a video about the thwarted attempt and UFC 250, but all the B-roll is actually from me that I took of the security there. So you're going to see that. So I appreciate you guys. That will be coming out, I believe, tomorrow. And then the tier video on special operations will be out next week. And that will obviously cause some controversy because there is one particular American special operations unit which I may have put at the very, very bottom. and you guys are gonna give my reasons why. No, yeah, there'll be some controversy, and there will be some butthurt Marines. I will just say that. We'll just put that out there. So, all right, I will talk to you guys all later, and you guys have a lovely, lovely day.